want to get started with the show because guess what? Our guest speaker is here, baby, and she is ready to inform us and to enlighten us and give us some great resources. And we are so humbled to have her on. See, I have you here on time, Miss Lisa told you. I want to introduce her to you guys. And we are going to be covering our first topic, of course, the topic of, we called it, do you know the lingo? Meaning that, do you know the language of criminal defense attorneys? Are you aware of the process? Are you aware of the do's and don'ts when hiring an attorney, how to research an attorney, questions to ask? What is the appropriate family-client relationship to have with your criminal defense attorney? I found that this was an important topic, reason being because at the beginning of the year, especially for low income and minority families, this is a time where if we have a loved one that's incarcerated, we want to be able to get them the best criminal defense attorney that we can afford. And a lot of times for families, and especially in my experience, that has been primarily at the beginning of the year. You have income tax coming in. That's when you kind of get more in the pocket than you normally do. For those who have incarcerated spouses, they may be able to relate to that. I know that's been my experience, where we've had to pay for a criminal, retain one. And at the beginning of the year, this is where the finances kind of take a upscale. So a lot of attorneys, especially here in our state, they are aware of that process. They are expecting that. And there's been so much horror stories and misfortune, unfortunately, in the criminal justice realm when it comes to hiring a criminal defense attorney. So we wanted to target those vulnerabilities, those families that are facing this decision, and also target those families that have been through this and may have to face it again. We have a great speaker here today. She is going to get us through this process and give us some great information. And I could not choose anyone else than the great, wonderful, prominent criminal justice reform advocate. That's what I call her. Miss Lisa Spees. Though she holds many hats, she's the director of Virginians for Judicial Reform. And you guys, she is amazing. She is a freedom fighter to the heart. I'm going to call out a few names. You may have seen these cases in public platform. Mr. Darnell Phillips, I'm so sorry. Mr. Adam Brissell, Dion Coleman, Mr. Ronnie Long, and Mr. Andrew Krivik. I may be pronouncing that last name incorrectly, but that's the closest I can get to that one. These 5 gentlemen had served many years in prison, wrongfully incarcerated, and Miss Lisa Spees was the top criminal reform advocate for their incarceration process, and she was able to facilitate in getting them back home to their families. So we not only applaud her for that, but we respect her call and we respect her work. And I could not have anybody else to come in and talk about this serious subject but her. So without further ado, I'm going to get her to do a formal introduction on her own because I may have left some things out because she does so many wonderful things. How are you, Miss Lisa Spees? Welcome.
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here today. So as Precious said, I'm the director for Virginians for Judicial Reform. In Virginia, we have some pretty state-specific issues. Virginia is a state that does not have parole currently. And so that's obviously a problem. In Virginia, if you have an 82-year sentence, you are doing 82 years before you come home. We just recently passed a good time bill. So we work to push criminal justice reform here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We also work and we advocate, the nonprofit does, on wrongful conviction and excessive sentencing cases. So people that were, a lot of times it's a racial disparity, Black and brown individuals that get sentenced to exponentially more time than their white counterparts. I was talking about with a friend of mine today that's helping me with the case, a guy by the name of Jesse Dunaway, who was the only person in the Commonwealth of Virginia prosecuted under this drug kingpin statute, and he was given a mandatory life sentence for a nonviolent drug offense, and he's served 16 years now. So there are a lot of different things that we do. I think one thing that would fit right into with what you guys do, Incarceration Speaks, the Angel Wise Project, is I host some, we call it Freedom Fighters Zoom meetings. So we have different special guests and advocates on to talk about specific issues like clemency, which, you know, guilt or innocent, being guilty or innocent. Clemency is a process that can be utilized to secure people's freedom in certain situations. We have different wrongful conviction attorneys and advocates and things like that that come on to give more information. So I just want to say, prior to getting into the topic, I think what you guys are doing is great. I really do. Having a sense of community, building people up, sharing resources, the more we know, the better we do. And I think it's really important, even when it's just building friendships with people that are in similar situations, to be able to lean on each other when you need it. It's remarkable. I really believed when I started doing this work about 5 years ago that I could be an island. And that was the way I worked my entire life. And now I've completely changed my outlook on that. You know, we're better together. And so sharing information like this and being a part of things, communities like this, I just think it's wonderful. So definitely keep doing what you're doing. And I'm really honored and happy to be here today. Yeah. In terms of specifically, in terms of sharing information in regard to hiring and retaining an attorney, what I would say is you really have to think with your head and not think with your heart. You have to ask a lot of questions, and you have to know the right questions to ask. So you kind of need to break it down sometimes and look at what is my loved one's case, right? Is it a wrongful conviction? Is it a sentence, an over sentencing? Are there appeals to be pursued? And then you want to kind of do a lot of research to find people in your area that specialize in those kind of cases. And then you want to start reaching out. Before you do that meeting, you want to write down all your questions, because you want to be prepared and you don't want to get caught up in something and then miss asking 3 things that are really important that later down the road you're not sure about. So you really want to take your time and you want to plan out for that meeting well. There have been times where I have reached out so sometimes for my cases, I find my clients attorneys that will work pro bono. And so there are times where I will reach out to someone that I think would be fantastic for a certain case. And maybe they can't do it for whatever reason. They just don't have the time or the bandwidth at that time to handle this extra case. Mm-hmm. And so what I will ask them is, you know, if this was your kid in prison, who would you recommend to go to? And I think that that makes a lot of sense, because then you're asking people that you already have a good feeling about, hey, if this was personal to you, how do I handle this? Yeah. And so that would be a way that I would do it. The other thing is, I would say, be wary for people that do not have your best interest at heart. If someone is promising you a positive outcome in the first few meetings, run like hell, run. Because no professional that is worth anything is going to promise you that they can get something done. You don't know what a judge is going to do something. You don't know what a jury is going to do something. If you're hiring a criminal trial attorney, you don't know. There are too many moving pieces in these situations. So you really want to take your time and listen to everything. And a lot of times I would say, don't just interview one person. Don't have one consultation. Don't get in a hurry, because when you do that, you paint yourself inside of a corner, and then you paid somebody money that you can't get back, you know? And when I've seen a lot of people over the course of this last year that have reached out and have done that, and they paid, you know, whether it be an attorney or an advocate or something money, and then they're put in a position where it's not coming back to you. So then you're behind the 8 ball, and you've lost out on this money that you've spent, and you have to wait until next year, or you have to bust your butt for 6 to 9 months or whatever to make that money again, to do it all over again. A lot of times people make mistakes in the beginning because they're not that familiar with this, which is completely normal. You only know what you know. So you go through these bad situations, and that's how you learn to do better down the road. But I really wish people would slow down a little bit in the beginning and do things right and set it up right. Get everything in writing. You want to have written out everything that this person is committing to doing. And you want, it doesn't have to be a super formal contract, although most attorneys will do that. But you just want to have something where it's very clear what they're promising to do for you. And I think that saves people that may not have your best interest at heart. It will save you from going down that road because they know that you're already smart enough to list these things out and to not make those mistakes. Make sure that when you're working with an attorney, for the cases that I work on, most of them, we use social media as a tool to amplify my clients' voices, right? So I want social media people, I want the whole world to know my guys' names, and I want them to know the facts of their case. But you also want to make sure that you're on the same page with your attorney and that what you're doing isn't going to hurt their case in any way.
Yeah.
So you really want to make sure that you're doing the right thing. The other thing is, for people that have hired an attorney and maybe they're handling all the legal things and you're working with an advocate on other things, building relationships with, let's say, a parole board or people within the governor's administration or whatever, you want to make sure that your lawyer and your advocate are on the same page in terms of what each other is doing. And you want to get that lawyer's opinion about things and get their blessing, really. I don't always agree. A lot of times lawyers are overly conservative, in my opinion, in terms of what they will agree to allow me to do. But I'm what they call default aggressive. So I will just go there. But so sometimes there are situations where I don't agree with a lawyer's call. But what I will tell you is I would never defy an attorney that I'm working with on something. If they say that, there is a reason why they say it. And I may not understand it and I may not agree with it, but I will do what they want me to do. Now, I may tell my client, hey, I don't agree with this. And maybe you need to consider getting a second opinion or a new attorney or whatever it is, but don't ever defy that person because it'll create all sorts of issues in terms of ego and personality conflict that I've made that mistake. Don't do that. So those would be some of the things that I would recommend. Really the biggest thing is just doing your research. If your loved one has a specific kind of case and you're looking for an attorney to handle that, do some research. Google whatever their charge is and the city that you're in and attorney and see what pops up and read through and get a list of 3 or 4 people that you can reach out to and ask for consultations, because that will really help you get a base of knowledge and information. Who are the players in my area? A lot of times better attorneys have much better relationships, and especially in terms of post-conviction cases. And those relationships can go a long way to getting a favorable outcome. And we want that for our loved ones. So not getting in a rush and really doing your research and planning out what you're doing. I've heard of clients who hired attorneys because this client's mother was crying on a sofa and he handed her some Kleenex. And this guy was damn near incompetent at trial. I mean, put on no defense. And not that she did anything wrong. She dealt with the knowledge that she had at the time. And so you don't fault that person for that, but you just got to really know what you're doing before you hire these people and they're unleashed to go do things on their terms. The other thing I would say in terms of having really healthy relationships and boundaries with these paid professionals that you hire, pick one very reliable family member. So if it's your husband, that person's mother and sister and wife don't all need to talk to the lawyer. The lawyer will end up resenting that typically, and they aren't going to want to give everybody an update. What lawyers that I've worked with have said is basically you get one CC. So maybe that person's mother is the contact and she forwards me information as the advocate, you know, but know that in advance so that people's feelings aren't hurt, and have that be very clear up front before you go down that road. And then there's, you know, we're dealing with very stressful situations, and it's very personal to us because these are our loved ones or our friends. And so we want them to come home and we want everything to go our way. But you want to set it up for success from the very beginning. And that's one thing that I would really say. You don't need all these chiefs. You don't want that, because it will signal disaster down the road. So those are just a few things. Precious, did you have some other questions for me?
Yes, a few things. I love to write when talking is going on, because you never know everything. So you brought up a lot of points that I've been writing down. And one of the things I wanted to ask was, when you hire a criminal defense attorney, you know, and how do you feel about the concept of this is a thing here in Louisiana. If your spouse is incarcerated and you have a criminal defense attorney, how do you feel about an attorney telling you personally that they work for you and not the incarcerated, your spouse?
No, ma'am. No, they do not. They work for your loved one. There are times where I absolutely disagree, that I wish someone was more free with information or whatever, because I want to know. I'm very passionate about the cases that I work on, and I want to know the information so I can plan my next step. I'm not their client.
Right.
My client is their client. They don't owe me anything, regardless if we work hand in hand in all these things. The only person that needs to be on board with what that lawyer is doing is the incarcerated individual or the defendant in those cases, period, point blank. And if they tell you something different, you need to, that's going to raise red flags, and be very careful going down that road with them. Because
Absolutely.
my only loyalty is to my client, not their family members, not their friends, not their girlfriend. It is to my client and that person alone. And that causes problems every once in a while, like weirdness or hurt feelings or whatever, which is never the intention. But the only person that I owe anything to is my client.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, and I asked the question because that was an experience my husband and I had thus far with attorneys. We were literally told, well, I don't work for him, I work for you. And I'm like, and it could have been a red flag too, because another thing that concerns me, and Lulu has some questions for you next, Miss Lisa. Another thing that concerns me is I don't know if there's a number or count of times that the involvement with the attorney and the incarcerated person, is there an allotted amount of time should they visit and communicate with them?
It's going to sort of depend on where is your loved one's case at any given time. If you're preparing an appeal or a writ for actual innocence, or you're preparing to file for clemency or something like that, you're going to be communicating more. Now, when there's downtime, it's not going to be as often, and that's okay. As long as your attorney is keeping the incarcerated individual aware of what's happening, asking that person's, not necessarily, so a lot of times the way I look at it is the lawyer can give their advice to the incarcerated individual and say, this is what I recommend. But ultimately, it's not the lawyer in prison, right? Or in jail. It's the incarcerated individual. So that person has to be the one sort of, manifest destiny, calling your own shots, if you will. So for me, that's the way I view it. Maybe different people view it differently. I had one client who wasn't aware of the type of clemency that had been filed. He thought that an absolute pardon had been filed, and they had filed a conditional pardon. and because the
Right.
communication was lacking, and so they weren't aware. And that's sad to me, because then that incarcerated individual was not a part of the planning or strategy for their own case, which maybe that affects when they, or if they go free, and maybe it doesn't. But either way, they should be a part of making those choices for themselves.
I agree. I totally agree. Lulu had some questions for you. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you so much. You've given us a lot of information. I don't think people realize the jewel that we have in front of us, because there's not very often times where we get to ask a lawyer questions, or, legal advice as well. We kind of have to do the research, and Google can only take us so far. So the question, you mentioned something, and I think that is something that's very important to a lot of families. You mentioned building those relationships with outside entities. And so my question to that is, when you're talking about the parole board, or even, I don't know, who else could you be talking about, but you also mentioned like the governor's cabinet. What type of ways do you encourage family members to go about building those relationships? So, for example, a person who's been incarcerated for an extended period of time, sometimes they look for them to have some type of outside community relationships. Well, how can you have that if you've been incarcerated, right? So what are some suggestions that you have to kind of help build up that community for the incarcerated individual?
So what I would say is, first of all, as family members and wives and girlfriends of incarcerated individuals, you yourselves have to be very careful in the way that you approach some of these people, and realize that less is more, right? Now, if you're working with an advocate, it can be different, because I can move differently than you can, because I have no dog in that person's, and I mean, I do, don't get me wrong. If it's a client, of course I want them to be free, but they're going to view my reaching out to them differently than a wife or a girlfriend or a family member. Now, one way that I would say, so how can you develop, how can you get on their radar, right? So I have a friend of mine who did, he embezzled about $50,000. He got sentenced to 32 years in prison for embezzling $50,000. He served 16 years before getting a pardon and coming home maybe about 7 months ago. Now, this individual, I can't even tell you how smart he was when he was in prison. He began, and really, I think initially he did this more for himself. He got involved in restorative justice programs. He got involved in positive things that were within the prison. And then he started utilizing some people that he knew on the outside, and me in the end. He developed a CPR and a Narcan program, because there were so many overdoses in the prison that he was, that they developed the CPR program to get everybody certified inside the prison, offenders certified. And when he did that, it opened up this whole new world, because then I wasn't just advocating for him, right? I was talking about the programs that he developed inside of prison. He told me some of the smartest things that I've heard that have helped me in terms of my advocacy moving forward. Every decision that he made inside was about whether or not that was going to bring him closer to home. So was he going to screw off and go watch the football game every time? No. He was taking classes. He was spending time getting CPR certified, getting instructor certified. He was calling me 14 times a day to call all these other people to get them to do different things. And when he did that, for me, when I could write letters and when I could call and speak about his situation, it wasn't just me saying, hey, let him out. It was saying, hey, man, go check out this thing that he's done at this prison. It's really remarkable. And then it puts you on their radar in a different way, because I wasn't saying grant him this pardon. I was saying, go look at this thing that he did. Right. And that really, really helps. The other thing is, so I have another friend whose husband was in prison. He has since come home as well. She got involved in legislation, right? So her husband was affected by a problem here in the Commonwealth of Virginia that we call fishback. There was a 5-year period of time when parole was abolished, where jurors were not told that parole had been abolished. And that was a huge problem here, because jurors in Virginia were the ones that recommended the number of years that a defendant got. So they weren't told that parole had been abolished, and then they're handing out 82, 72-year sentences, 104 years a couple of years ago for people that stole wheels and tires and things. I mean, it's insane. So anyway, my friend Carrie, she got involved in pushing for legislation that would remedy that issue here in Virginia. And while doing that, she went to town halls, which through COVID, maybe it's been a little bit easier because we can all log on to Zoom.
Yeah.
But she went to town halls and she planned events and she planned rallies. And while doing all of that, she met other legislators and she met parole board members and the parole board chair and things like that. Here we have the Secretary of Public Safety. She met contacts within his office. She was never advocating directly for her husband, which is what made it so masterful in terms of getting him home, right? She didn't make it a personal thing for herself. It helped all of these other people as well. And in turn, her husband was one of the very first people that ended up coming home because of the way she handled herself throughout the entire thing. Build relationships with other advocates, build relationships with other friends. If you can offer them something over here, I promise you when there's an opportunity for them to hit you back and return that favor, they'll do it. You've got to get involved in these things. You've got to find out what are the issues that affect your area that are a problem. And when you start reaching out and being a part of those things, which is hard because we're all trying to manage our own lives. But when you do that, it's going to open up whole new worlds. You know, it really does make a big difference. So I tried the first case that I worked on. I thought I could do it all by myself. I didn't want nobody's help. Don't bother me and don't mess up my stuff. That was my attitude. It was horrible. It was horrible. But that's where I was at the time. And now I just see things completely different. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and that's really helpful because a lot of times people just don't know the importance of those outside forces. But you also, and you said, you also mentioned, excuse me, the legislation, right? So when a person is going about trying to get more involved in the legislative process, for myself, South Carolina's laws are very similar to Virginia in a lot of ways. They have the truth in sentencing, the mandatory minimums, all those types of things. But what I have found is that even once you have something that you're able to present in legislative form, how do people get those things through? You know what I mean? Like, how do you find the sponsorship? How do you find the support to say, you know, I may have a personal relationship with certain senators, but I'm kind of at a loss in a lot of ways with trying to submit legislation that would be kind of advantageous to a masses, if that makes sense.
So what I would do is I would look, we don't always have to recreate the wheel, right? I didn't want to work with anybody, but it made a whole lot more sense once I started doing that. So I could coordinate with other groups that were pushing for the same kind of laws that I was pushing with, right? And maybe they have contacts. Maybe I was talking to a friend of mine last night, and there's a law that I want to change here in Virginia. And my goal is to have it pushed through the next General Assembly session next year. And so I'm starting to work on it now. You have to plan in advance. You have to be proactive. When I was speaking to my friend said, hey, because I was thinking, who is the patron that I'm going to go to and try to push this law through with? And he said, well, you should think about this person because they had something similar this year, right? So look at the people that are already championing those issues in prior General Assembly sessions and reach out to their offices. You don't even need to ask necessarily the first time you call someone, a delegate or a state senator. You don't even necessarily need to ask to speak with that representative or delegate or whatever. Just ask to speak with their chief of staff. Have a conversation with them. Introduce yourself. Hey, my name is what? I have an interest in parole. I would like to talk to you about an idea that I had for a bill for next session. If the conversation goes well and you feel like that person is receptive, say, hey, do you think there would be a time where I could get on the phone with Representative X and discuss this? Because I know that person has already submitted bills that maybe didn't go all the way through. The other thing is, as private citizens that are interested in this legislation, dude, get on Facebook and create a Facebook page or a Facebook group for that issue, right? So there's a group here in Virginia called the Humanization Project. And the Humanization Project got behind a good time bill and earned sentence credit for all these people that don't have access to parole. So if they behave and they take part in programming and all these things, they can get a certain amount of time off of their sentence if they fit in a certain group of crimes. If you're a violent offender, you don't qualify, and it's craziness. But it affects about 6,000 people here out of the 30,000 people that are incarcerated in Virginia. Get online and create that group and that page for that issue. Start doing weekly lives. Start reaching out to people. Look on comments. When you see, let's say you're going on here in Virginia, there's one news outlet called Wavy, and I always look at their stuff. Go on Wavy News and find articles about that topic and that issue. See people that comment on those posts, right? That are like-minded as you. Send them a friend request, send them a message, send them an invite to your page or your group. Especially the people, man, I've seen some really very intelligent people commenting on things. I want to work with them. I want them speaking for my bill or my cause or whatever it is. So reach out and really, try to create community as much as you can, even though in the times of COVID, it's a little bit more difficult in terms of being in person. All these virtual things, I think, are actually a lot easier for us to do. It's more realistic long term. I got worn out last General Assembly session, and I wouldn't have been a part of anything this year because I just needed to regroup mentally, except for the fact that it's been on Zoom and things. So I could log on and be a part from my bedroom. My little picture up there. Nobody had to see me. It was beautiful. So those are some of the things that I would recommend. Was there anything else specifically you were thinking of?
Well, I don't want to hog up all the time. Did anybody else have a question? Yeah, let me let Tamika go, because I'll be going down the list like.
Oh yeah, my radar, girl, my notes is 3 pages already. Great information. Yes, Lady Tamika.
So that was awesome. I love that information you just gave. Light bulb moments. Yeah. So I'm kind of reminiscing back to my experience when my husband first got locked up. And I was one of those people who was absolutely clueless. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned you stressed about doing research, starting with Google, looking up certain cases, and then also asking questions with the lawyer. So my question is, what are some key questions someone should ask when finding a lawyer, or what exactly should they be researching? And, just what are key questions they should be asking in general? I know every case is different, but where should they start as far as what basic information should they know? Because I was just totally lost.
Right. You want to realize that there are different kinds of lawyers, right? There are trial lawyers, there are appellate lawyers, there are lawyers that specialize in clemency. There are lawyers that will handle parole presentations for clients. You want to make sure that you understand exactly where you are in the process. I know some of the finest attorneys in Virginia, but I couldn't give you a one size fits all for who I would go to. It depends on where I'm at. So if I'm at the trial part of it, that's very different than being in a clemency situation, right? Mm-hmm. So understand where you are in your process, right? And then you want to research and you want to find the people that have been successful in that thing. And I would even specifically say successful with your particular crime. What kind of case was it? Was it a murder case? Was it a malicious wounding? Was it fraud? All of those things are totally different from each other. And there are some attorneys that are much better at one kind of thing than another. For me, what I did when I first started looking online for things, I looked for successful outcomes, right? I would look at wrongful conviction cases, which, by the way, you can find articles on people getting exonerated almost every day. Then I would go back and I would read, who is that person's attorney? You put that on a list. Now it's going to, initially I just worked on cases here in Virginia. Now I work on cases in 5 states. But so know your area, use referrals. So sometimes I don't know of anybody, like in the beginning, I didn't know of anybody in Tennessee that I would go to for one of my clients. I didn't have many relationships there. But once I met someone and they knew someone, then they could give me different options of that. Also, you know, like I said before, framing it in a way that's going to make it personal and important to that person you're asking for the referral from. If this was your daughter or your son, who would you go to? Because a lot of times you'll get a very different answer when you frame it that way, because it's not about, hey, who are you friends with that you might have lunch with every Tuesday? This is, hey, who you put your kids' hands in? You know, people look at that very different. So I would say that. The other thing is that you can always do, and I would really recommend, reach out to the bar association in your state.
Yes.
See if the lawyer that you're looking at has complaints against them. Read the reviews on social media, or not necessarily social media, but Google. A lot of times they have all these different databases with lawyer directories and things.
Mhm.
And you'll see some really crazy they didn't show up at court. You know, maybe an attorney was really good 10 years ago, and maybe
Right.
something's going on in their life that they're not, you know, an authority on that thing anymore. So make sure that you're looking up as much relevant, accurate information for today, not necessarily 25 years ago or 5 years ago for that matter. Things change all the time with the way crimes are legislated and handled in different states. So make sure you're really clear on what law, what appeal, what issue you're trying to fight your case on, if that's what you're doing, you know, and learn as much as you can about these different issues. So I thought I knew, the first case I worked on was a clemency case, and I thought I had a very solid understanding of that. And about a year and a half in, something happened that made me realize I knew nothing about what I thought I knew. And that wasn't necessarily my fault, because I just hadn't met the right people that could clue me into things. But when you know better, you do better. And now I'm able to give much better advice to people, and I have a much better chance at a positive outcome than I had when I first started. You know, I was green. We're all green. And, you know, like you said, you were clueless.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you be? You've
Mhm.
never been in that situation before. There's no shame in that. You know what I mean? It's when people think that they know and they move forward quickly with making decisions, then you paint yourself into a corner, and then you get yourself in trouble, you know,
That's
with
right.
with spending money or thinking someone's good that isn't respected anymore, or whatever the issue is. So
And last question,
Any
kind of
specific-
I just want to piggyback off of that particular part. I'm sorry, Tamika. How do people find lawyers that represent multiple states? Like, you know, in some states, like South Carolina is one of the original slave states. Louisiana is notoriously known for a ridiculous amount of long-term sentencing. Sometimes it helps when you pull people from other places, but I just haven't, you know, a lot of people say, I don't know how to find a lawyer from somewhere else that will represent this state, as opposed to kind of the system that can be diluted or, you know, corrupts in their given state.
I have a client on death row in Pennsylvania right now that is a wrongful conviction client of mine. And we've been told quite a few times that a lawyer from outside of the state might be better for political reasons. A lot of times, like you're talking about, it's an old boys club. And you don't always feel like you're going to get a fair shot necessarily with a person from within that system, right? So what you need to look up, a lawyer doesn't always need to be licensed in your state. Maybe, okay, if you're talking about Virginia and North Carolina, from Richmond, where I live, to North Carolina, it's 90 minutes. So maybe you find a lawyer that you like in Richmond and you look at what the law is there. A lot of times you can use an attorney in North Carolina that's going to be the attorney of record on that case, but it allows this attorney from Virginia to really handle things and do things the way that he wants to do it. And they're really the person running the case or doing things in court or whatever. So look up and see what is possible in your state, because it's going to differ for each state. And then again, you can say, hey, I'm concerned about this. I'm concerned about getting, you know, I'd like to explore getting someone from outside of this state. And again, ask for referrals. Reach out to people in Facebook groups that are like-minded. Hey, has anybody used a person from this area? Does anybody have a referral for that? And then go back and use that information. Never just take the referral and run with it, right? You always want to do the consultation. You always want to write down your questions. You always want to ask everything. A lot of these lawyers, man, super slick talkers, super slick. Don't get caught up in that. Don't let them intimidate you. Don't let them make you feel like you don't know nothing because you didn't go to law school. You are, we only know what we know, but we're entitled to ask every question that we have and to feel comfortable with what we're doing moving forward.
Absolutely.
Lisa, I want to follow up with something you said earlier. Are there any specific websites that you recommend that family members can go to do research on, or does it depend upon what state they're in? And if it's no specific website, what terms should they be looking up?
Well, you can, so some of the lawyers that I work with, there's a website called AVVO.
Yes.
And I can send you these links too, but it's AVVO. And that's a website where people are able to go in and review lawyers that they've worked with. So maybe you go in and you do some search criteria for your area, and then you read the comments. What I would do, look, if I got a referral, the first thing I would do before anything else was try to look up reviews for them online and see what other people are saying. I have a case that I'm doing some research on right now. I haven't decided whether to take on this client or not, but this client still thinks a lot of his trial attorney, right? Even though he got convicted and he says he didn't do this crime, okay? I went online and I looked up the reviews for this attorney. So he's been in prison for 16 years. There were multiple reviews that this person did not even show up in court for hearings that were scheduled, that they took a large retainer and they did not show up in court. That was terrifying to me, but it also told me a lot about, hey, maybe this wasn't about the case. Maybe she wasn't prepared. Maybe, you know what I mean? There's a lot of maybes in there. You don't know.
Yeah.
But I think the more you can fill in the gaps and you can see what different people are saying about them, that's why I would say go to the bar association. Send a request to them asking, hey, are there any complaints with this attorney? And no, because these things are going to affect that could affect your loved one's freedom.
Yes.
And nothing is too much of a hassle to make sure that you don't screw that up, because we're the ones moving on the outside, right? Yeah. They can't do these things. We have to do that for them. So absolutely. Really take your time and do as much research and due diligence as you possibly can. And ask questions. I'm happy if people have questions about some of these issues, or you're getting ready to hire someone, I'd be happy to answer them for you and try to help you along in that process.
That's awesome.
Awesome. And yeah. I can also relate. I'm gonna, Ms. Janelle, you have any questions, Lady Janelle?
I do.
Yeah.
My husband was originally sentenced to 27 years and 8 months. But his sentence only carries what he's charged with. I think it carries 8 years. So they gave him like 20 years in enhancements.
Okay.
As far as enhancements, if I was going to hire an attorney, would I hire an appeals attorney to get those enhancements taken off? Or how would I go? And I am in California.
You're in California. Okay. So you guys have some new things going on. What county are you in?
I'm in San Diego County, but his crime was committed in LA County.
Hey, that's good for you.
Yeah, so he wants to submit his paperwork, but the judges have been overruling the DA Gaskin as far as approving people's appeals or taking off enhancements. Mm-hmm. So he was kind of like waiting right now because he doesn't want to submit all that just to be denied.
What I would say is take your time right now, because the courts are overwhelmed. Number one, because of COVID, it slowed everything down. Number two, the courts in California are overwhelmed. I believe they're called like a Franklin motion for these enhancements issues. I think that's what they're called. And so everyone that falls into this criteria with these these crazy sentences, they all won out, right? And so they're all filing it right now. And
Yeah.
that's why I think that a lot of people are getting kind of denied, or maybe they're in a rush. And so something's not technically correct in what's filed. And then you get denied. And then you can't go back down that road again a lot of times. You know, you don't get multiple attempts at the apple. So you want to really take your time and make sure that what I would be doing is I would be looking for news articles about this stuff, see what lawyers are speaking out about these issues in the area where his crime was, see what kind of relationships, or if you can online, see what kind of relationships those attorneys have, how well connected they are. In a situation like that, I would try to be as careful as possible and make sure that person is well connected so that you have the best possible chance as a favorable outcome, because it's something that you won't be able to relitigate again down the road. So I know of a couple of attorneys that are filing those motions that I can send you some information on if you'd like.
Okay, that'd be great.
You're welcome. But yeah, like I said, just take your time and be careful about it. Look up news articles, see what lawyers are talking about it, and we can go from there.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Amazing, amazing. And I definitely want to go back to this snippet. Miss Lisa, I can definitely relate to the difference between my husband and I. We have been through 3 criminal defense attorneys with a different experience each time. And the beginning process, I relate to so many, just like Angel Wife Tamika, I was clueless, you know, on the entire process. And we suffered a lot of things because of not knowing what I know today, not having the information I have, you know, now. And when I finally got it, hey, we can't just get anybody. And I had paid for consultations. And, you know, when I began to do the research, get to those websites, talk to other people. Well, I mean, this last attorney, you know, that we locked in, I really did the work before I handed over the money. And it, you know, even though, you know, we're still in the pending process and there has been some unfortunate events with the attorney, but I feel that as far as legal experience, we did a better job on that last one, getting one retained that had more experience, of course, reputable reputation at that time. And doing the work definitely makes a difference in who you hire.
When you do that way, you set yourself up for success down the road.
Yeah.
When you rush into it and you make some of these decisions because you're following your heart and because you have a good feeling about someone, that's where things tend to fall apart down the line. Sometimes you feel like a lawyer really likes you, right? Well, a lawyer gets clients because they sold themselves, right?
Mhm.
So of course, during a consultation, sure, they like you and maybe they really do like you. But at a certain point, when they've got 14 people contacting them, they're going to flip out. And so that's why I think that setting up those boundaries and having a clear communication about what they're willing to do and what they expect and those things up front is going to save you frustration and heartache down the line. Knowing what their success rate is for the issue that you're contacting them about. You know, all of these little things can make a huge difference when it comes to you know, somebody coming home or somebody winning appeal or getting these enhancements removed in California.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I mean, you were like a box of candy today. You just brought all the treats and all the goods and all the great information. Oh my God, ladies, how are we feeling? Or is this good or what?
This is
I
awesome.
mean, we
Information.
definitely appreciate you, Miss Lisa Spees, and you have taken time out of your rest time to be here, and we are completely humbled by that. And we thank you greatly. I want you, before you leave, if you can share your website with the audience, where they can go on to learn more about your foundation, your follow also on Instagram, to follow, learn about more about what you do, in case that they have some questions about possibly, wanting to get involved or request for services. Can you let the audience know how you are able to be contacted?
Yeah, so on Instagram, my screen name is Lisa, Lisa, period, Spees, Spees. I have a website, lisaspees.me. There's a contact form and my email is all right there. The nonprofit Virginians for Judicial Reform, it's the letter V, the number 4, JR.org. And you can go there and look for more information. I'm pretty responsive in terms of social media and email, and I'd be happy to answer questions if people need further information. I really, I think that doing these topics is super important. And if one person was helped by not getting scammed or ripped off or frustrated or defeated because of these things, then I'm happy to do it. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we are so grateful that you were able to be here with us. Anything else you have, ladies, for Miss Lisa before she retires with us for today to enjoy her evening? We all
Thank
good?
you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
you're most welcome. And I hope you enjoy your spicy session that's on after me.
Oh boy, I think everybody's waiting.
Right. Well, the business is out of the way and now you can all enjoy yourself. So perfect.
Oh, well, we thank you so much. I mean, it was very beneficial information, and you've actually given me some nuggets as well for Incarceration Speaks. And I just want to say that networking is powerful. And I could relate to that part of, and for me in the beginning, it was not more of wanting to just do it by myself. It was more of trust factors. I have a high trust factor issue. So I was really keen and sensitive about my connections, and do I say too much or do I say too little? Do I trust that if I say, hey, this is what we have, could I trust that they would take care of what I'm sharing? And if they would give me a good, reputable, contact in return, or be as reciprocated to me as I am to them. So trust factor for me was a big issue in the beginning of it all, but I'm learning more temperance, and I'm learning to open up more, and I'm networking more, and I'm not trusting in people, but I'm trusting in the God in people. And I
Right.
think that has made such a significant difference in me as a leader, being able to trust the process that God is doing through me, because I know that He's not going to lead me in the wrong direction.
Right.
And I'm grateful for that.
I think that kind of leaving you on one last note is there are a lot of national organizations that work with the issues that we're talking about, whether it be mass incarceration or mandatory minimums. Check out Dream Corps. Check out, it was formerly known as Cut 50. Check out Families Against Mandatory Minimums. These are national organizations that will most likely have chapters in your state and maybe in your county that you can get involved in. Those organizations down the line, once you form relationships there, can advocate on your loved one's behalf. And ultimately, that's what you're going to want. You want people speaking out from all different directions for your loved one. And that makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you guys, for the audience, there will be a playback from this video today. And when we do repost the video, I am going to pin a lot of these organizations that are being brought up today for anybody that is in a situation where they want to get deeper into their loved one's advocacy, or need more information, or just need to hear this again, to know all of the resources and do's and don'ts when having an attorney on board. So Miss Lisa, we thank you. V4JR.org. This is Miss Lisa Spees' organization. Please visit it today, and you will be able to get signed on, subscribed, and everything else. Connect with her, network with her. She's such a humble person, and she loves what she does, and I respect her so much for that. Thank you incredibly for being here. And I hope that you have a wonderful weekend, rest of your weekend. And we are going to talk again very soon. I
That's
thank you so much. Have a
You're
good
most
evening, Miss Lisa.
sending
Okay.
all good vibes and good intentions to all of you.
All
Thank you.
right. God bless. Thank you. Bye-bye.